Hi, this is Group 4, and this is our ecosystem project. First, this is a picture of our model and the endangered animal we are doing, our loggerhead sea turtles. We have both land and water ecosystems, including both biotic and abiotic factors and all trophic levels. In our model, the 5 abiotic factors are sun, water, rocks, sand, and temperature. The 5 biotic factors are trees, algae, fish, seabirds, and fungus. We have 3 food chains. The first one starts with turtle eggs. Skunks eat turtle eggs, snakes eat skunks, and seabirds eat snakes. The second one starts with algae. Shrimps eat algae, fish eat shrimps, turtles eat fish, and sharks eat turtles. The last one also starts with algae. Crabs eat algae, jellyfishes eat crabs, then turtles eat jellyfishes, and sharks eat turtles. The arrows demonstrate the way energy transfers. Next is our food web. The food web reflects a more specific relationship between organisms and better represents the reality. We can see that algae gives its energy to fish, jellyfishes, adult turtles, crabs, and shrimps. Ocean bacteria give their energy to shrimps and crabs. Jellyfishes give their energy to adult turtles and young turtles, and the energy of shrimps transfers to fish. Adult turtles' energy and other fishes' energy transfers to sharks. Turtle eggs will be eaten by ants, lizards, snakes, skunks, and seabirds. Ants will be eaten by skunks and lizards, and skunks and lizards' energy would transfer to snakes. Snakes, fish, and young turtles will be eaten by seabirds. Last is our energy pyramid. At the bottom, we have our producers, algae and ocean bacteria. At the top of it is the primary consumer, shrimp. Fish are the secondary consumers, and sea turtles are the tertiary consumers. At the top is the shark. Fungus and crabs are decomposers. They eat up other dead organisms' bodies. 10% of the energy transfers from each level, and 90% of energy would be lost at each level. So if the producer level has 100% of energy, the second level would have 10%, the third will only have 1%, the fourth would have 0.1%, and the highest level would only have 0.01% of energy.
So scenario 1 is if a forest fire kills most of the trees. This can cause a lack of shelter and accordingly cause a severe decline in the population density of the ecosystem, both in the land and aquatic environments, and this decline of multiple species populations can lead to a lack of food. So our scenario 1 vocabulary terms include the first term, which is abiotic, which means non-living things within an ecosystem, and in this case the fire is the abiotic factor as it is not a living thing. The second term is consumer, which are heterotrophs that get energy by eating or consuming other foods and organisms. So skunks, ants, and lizards are secondary consumers, since both prey on baby turtles and turtle eggs. Snakes are tertiary consumers, since they prey on skunks and lizards. And meanwhile, turtle predators, such as the shark, would also be tertiary consumers, since they are the highest level of consumers and prey on adult loggerhead turtles. Turtle prey, such as jellyfish, shrimp, fish, and crabs, would be primary consumers, since they prey on algae, and adult loggerhead turtles would be secondary consumers, as they consume other primary consumer organisms. The next term is secondary succession, which is a type of ecological succession in which plants and animals recolonize an environment or area after a major ecological disturbance. In this case, the major ecological disturbance is the forest fire, so after the forest fire, small plants and decomposers such as fungi will be able to recolonize the environment, and in a shorter period of time since the soil still remains. The next term is competition, which occurs between organisms coexisting in the same ecosystem, and these interactions are struggles between organisms for food, territory, mates, and resources, especially if those natural resources are limited. Due to the forest fire, shelter is limited, causing land animals such as lizards, skunks, and snakes to compete for habitats, and the declining source of food that was once located in the forest will also be limited, causing a competition for food. The next term is population density, which is the number of individuals in an area. In this case, the overall population density would decrease since the forest fire caused declining populations in lizards, skunks, snakes, and turtle prey. Density-dependent limiting factors are factors that depend on the population size and can limit the population size. The density-dependent limiting factor in this case would be competition and predation. Competition among animals for shelter and food will limit the population, as more animals would die, and predation will limit other species populations, such as if turtles would limit turtle prey population. Next, density-independent limiting factors are factors that do not depend on population size and can limit the population size. The density-independent limiting factor in this scenario would be the forest fire, as it is an ecological disturbance that reduced much of the many species populations. Lastly, predators are organisms that eat other organisms, and prey are organisms which the predator eats. In this case, sharks would prey on turtles, turtles would prey on turtle prey, including jellyfish, shrimp, fish, and crabs. Likewise, jellyfish, shrimp, and fish would prey on algae.
The short-term effects of the forest fire would be a decrease in lizard, skunk, and snake populations. It'll destroy their habitats, causing a lack of shelter and rise of competition. The forest fire is a density-independent factor, which are abiotic. Food would also become limited since the previous food sources located in the forest would be less because of the forest damage. This would cause a decrease in populations of both prey and predator species. This decrease in the species population will lessen the amount of food predators can consume, causing competition between the larger predators that survived the forest fire because of the limited amount of natural resources. This is a density-dependent factor as it affects the population density of this ecosystem. Meanwhile, the fungi population will increase as more decomposed material will be available for fungi to break down. As for the long-term effects, the secondary succession in the forest will affect the decomposers there as well, but they will be able to rebuild their environments easier than the larger organisms. Due to the absence of larger predators, the turtle population would increase as less turtle eggs and baby turtle predators would be present from the forest fire. This would eventually lead to an increase in shark populations. These turtles are consumers, so that will also affect all the organisms turtles gain energy from as food. With the rise in turtle population numbers, the species they prey on, such as crabs, jellyfish, shrimp, fish, and algae, would decrease as there would be more turtles to eat them. The ant population would also increase as ants would now have no competition for preying on turtle eggs and baby turtles. The ocean population density would eventually decrease as a whole from the declining populations of several species.
So here we have scenario 2 in which algae are being infected by a type of fungi which reduces 90% of the ocean's population. So some vocabulary terms for scenario 2 are biotic, a living component of the ecosystem, examples, animals and plants. Uh, of the fungus-infected algae is a biotic factor, a living thing. Decomposer, an organism that breaks down the remains of a dead organic material. Fungi and crabs are decomposers. Population density, the number of individuals in a certain area. The population density as a whole would decrease from the infection of the algae, which in turn eradicated 90% of the ocean's population. Density-dependent limiting factors, factors that affect an ecosystem based on the population density. Examples are disease, predation, competition, and etc. The infection in the algae would be the density-dependent limiting factor as it limits and reduces the ocean population, as well as the competition and parasitic relationships among species. Predator-prey relationship. A predator is an organism that targets/hunts another organism. The prey are the organisms that are killed by the predators for food/energy. A predator-prey relationship keeps population at a balance. Example: the increase in the prey's population will eventually result in the increase in the predator's population. Turtles are the prey of snakes, but they are also the predator of fish. Parasitism, a symbiotic relationship where one organism benefits from the other organism and that other organism is actually harmed in this process. The fungi are infecting the algae for nutrients and such, but in the process, they're killing them. They have continued to do this and eventually wiped out 90% of the ocean's population by doing this. Stability in an ecosystem. An ecosystem's ability to maintain a healthy environment and apply self-regulating mechanisms to return to its steady state after disturbance. The stability in the environment is weak as many species populations decline. Consumer, an organism that gains energy/food by feeding on other organisms or organic matter due to its own inability to make food/energy, also known as autotrophs. Turtles, sharks, snakes, all of them are consumers. Competition, the interactions between organisms for limited resources such as food, territory, and mates. Seabirds and skunks compete for food, or the turtles, which they share as a common prey. Eutrophication, the gradual increase in phosphorus, nitrogen, and other plant nutrients in an aging aquatic ecosystem, such as a lake. The fungi may have been present previously, so to balance things out, but eutrophication might have boosted its growth and caused it to take a large amount of algae, so much that it is now affecting the ecosystem and the food web.
So, scenario 2, the algae at the bottom of the ocean is infected by a fungus, which reduces their numbers by 90%. The algae undergo a process called eutrophication that will have severely depleted its population because of the parasitic relationship that the algae has with the fungi that it is infected by. The fish, shrimp, and jellyfish in this ecosystem will have a population decrease because of the lack of one of their main food sources, the algae. The turtle populations will also decrease because their food sources will be decreasing because the fish, shrimp, and jellyfish will have less food to eat. And shark populations will have the same sort of scenario where their food source, the fish, shrimp, jellyfish, and turtles, will have a population decrease because their food sources are depleting as well. Crabs are decomposers, so in the short run, they'll have multiple food sources, but in the long run, they will have less food sources because the death rate of the other species is greater than the birth rate, eventually making too many crabs to too little food sources. The overall population density will have depleted for multiple species across the board, and this in turn will affect the predator-prey relationship because many species will have depleted food sources, and the predators of those species will have less food and their populations will decrease as well. There will also be competition between species for smaller amounts of food available because the fish, shrimp, jellyfish, and turtles all have to compete against each other for the remaining algae. The stability of this environment will be significantly weakened because of these population decreases for such vital parts of the ecosystem. All of the density-dependent limiting factors involve biotic elements of this ecosystem, including the competition between species, the parasitic relationship between the fungi and the algae, and the loss of food sources and the algae infection. One of the long-term effects of a potential extinction. So one of the long-term effects is a potential extinction of the algae population because of the effects of the eutrophic process. Because of this process, oxygen will be taken out of the water, causing basically death and disruption to the aquatic ecosystem. This will cause many of the fish to die and also takes away predators and prey alike. The turtles will lose a stable food source and therefore its population will deplete, and this will also cause the population of its prey to deplete as well. basically what's going to happen is that the oxygen will be taken out of the water, and a lot of these animals and plants depend on oxygen, and so they'll die out essentially. And this overall eutrophication process could basically cause the possible extinction of all of these species in the water and its surroundings because there's no oxygen in the water. And basically, it could collapse the ecosystem.